Okay, so I've got two equations up here now, okay, two separate problems, and so I'm just going to do one at a time. So we're done with drawing more than one line on the same graph. Again, I said that's not normal. It's normal to just draw one line per graph, but I just wanted to show you that to compare what the m and b values do, okay? But anyway, let's get into these, okay? So it says graph the linear equation y equals 2x minus 3, okay? So we look at this, and again, the first thing that's helpful to do is determine what's my m value and what's my b value? It's helpful to clarify this early on, okay? So you know what each number does, right? So m would be my number multiplied by the x, my first one, and so that would be 2. And again, right here, it's helpful to say as a fraction 2 over 1, okay? Right? If it's not given to you as a fraction, you say it's that over 1. And again, that top number is the rise, the bottom number is the run, okay? And so we'll do that in a second. And then my other number, my b value here, would be negative 3. And I don't need to turn that one into a fraction because, again, your b value is telling you where you begin on your y-axis, right? What we just talked about. So I begin with my b value, right? And just like this says, I begin with my b value. And for this first one, that would be negative 3. So I go to negative 3 on my y-axis. And I draw a point right here. And then I'm done with that. Once I draw that one point, the b value served its purpose. I'm done with it. Okay, now it's all about the slope, the m value. So my m value here is 2 over 1. And so again, positive 2 means I move up 2. And then a positive 1 on the bottom, run, means I move right 1. Okay, so from this beginning point, I move up 2, right 1, make my new point. Up 2, right 1. You keep doing that over and over and over. Count that same pattern. Up 2, right 1, point. You have, 4 or 5 of them, doesn't really matter. As many points as you want. Just, I would say, minimum 3 or 4 points. Okay, so you know you counted right. And there's your line. How beautiful is that? What a line, right? Number 2 here says graph the linear equation y equals negative 1 half x plus 4. Okay, so you look at that. Again, first thing you want to do is determine your m and your b numbers. So again, my m number is my first one that it shows, the one multiplied by the x. So that would be negative 1 half. And a question a lot of kids ask is, hey, I see the negative kind of next to this fraction. Does that mean the top number or the bottom number is negative? That's a great question. Or does that mean both are negative? Okay. And I'll tell you, it's a good default to just kind of think of like push that negative up top and just say, okay, that's negative 1 over positive 2. Again, I said in other videos that we should not make both of them negative because a negative divided by a negative, that's what that would be saying, that actually ends up equaling a positive. So that wouldn't be the same, okay? And technically, yeah, you could make it positive 1 over negative 2. That would be the same, and the line would end up being the same. But again, I just for the sake of patterns and consistency, I just say move the negative with the top number every time. Okay, that will end up working out for you. Okay, so negative 1 over 2 is my rise over run, and so that means I'm moving down 1, right 2. Okay, that's where I would be moving. And then my b value is a second number, positive 4. Okay, so I'm moving down 1, right 2, and I start at positive 4, always on the y-axis. Really common mistake is to go, okay, positive 4, boom, and that's where I begin and draw from there. But it's not called your, I erased it, but it's not called your x-intercept, it's called your y-intercept, right? You don't start on the x-axis, you start on the y-axis, okay? Count up 4 on your y-axis and you start there, okay? Always your y-axis for your b number, okay? So I start at negative 4, and then I move down 1, right 2, point. Down 1, right 2, point, and so on, okay? There's my line, very nice. There you go, okay? And again, comparing these two lines, yeah, we see that one is moving kind of as an incline, okay? And that's pretty steep, right? Almost close to being vertical. And then this one is a decline. From left to right, it's going down, okay? And I say you read a line like you read a book, from left to right. So when I say, like you could say, oh, if you go from this way, it is inclining, but that's true. But from left to right, it's declining. And for this one, same thing, from left to right, it is inclining, okay? So that's when I say those words, that's what I mean, okay? And yeah, this one's not as steep because the fraction, the slope is pretty close to 0, like I said before. And I just wanted to review with you in case you're still a little bit stuck or could just use another couple of examples to try to understand it more. So just going through this one, y equals negative 2/3 x plus 1, okay? So what we want to do first is identify what the m and b values are, okay? And then we can graph the line based on that. So again, this m value here says negative 2/3. And I said when it is negative, only the top number is the negative one. The bottom one can be positive, okay? Because if we made them both negative, then it'd be a negative divided by negative being a positive, and that is not the same. So we want it to be a negative over a positive, right? So if the top number is the rise, that's telling us it's going down 2, and then the run, the bottom number, is telling us it's going positive 3 or right 3 in the x direction, okay? So that's where it's going to move, but we need to draw a starting point on this y-axis, right? And that's what the b value tells us. And the b value is this plus 1, positive 1, right? So that's telling me on the y-axis, I go to positive 1, right? And then I'm going to move from there this many steps, or this many directions, right? So down 2, because this negative 2, so I move down 2 from there. Then I move right 3. 1, 2, 3. And there's where my next point is. I keep moving that same amount, right? Because with lines, it's very consistent. And then I draw my line by connecting the dots. And I draw my arrows on the end because, yes, it will move forever in those directions. Okay? Looking at number 2 here, y equals x. Okay, now this one can be tricky because we don't see any numbers given to us like we did here, right? So you might be saying, okay, if I think about what the m and b values are, like what would those be here? And for a lot of the time when you learn it this way, this line can be really tricky because it doesn't show you those numbers, okay? But they're there. The number, we still do have an m and b value, but because they're kind of using the default m and b values, okay? So if we think y equals x, right, and the m number would be the number multiplied by the x. And I'll tell you, and I've said this before, but the default m value is 1, okay? Because 1 times x would still be just x based on that identity property, right? 1 times x is still x, and so that's why they don't write the 1, okay? But that still means my slope is positive 1, or making it a fraction, positive 1 over 1. Okay, so that's kind of the default slope, which means I'm going to be moving up 1, right 1. Okay, and then you might be saying, okay, then what's my b value? Okay, my b value is not going to be 1, right? Because that's an actual value, because this is a number kind of being added or subtracted onto the x, right? If I said plus 1, right, that's a value that is significant. It would be shown to you, right, like it is for number 1 here. But kind of the value that would be there that wouldn't need to be shown would be 0, right? Because adding 0 to something, again, that's your additive identity property. But that's kind of saying, yeah, plus 0 doesn't change that. That like x plus 0 is still x. So that's why it doesn't say plus 0, because you don't really need it. But for our sake, with graphing these lines, it is helpful to add it. So yeah, the b value here is going to be 0, and the m value is 1 over 1, okay? So a b value of 0 means I'm starting on the y-axis at 0. And where is that? Well, that's right at my origin, right? Right in the middle. And then my slope being 1 over 1 means I don't have to count very far, right? I just count up 1, right 1, make my next point. Just up 1, right 1 each time, make a new point. And I have a few of them there, so now I can connect them. There is my second line, okay? Do a couple more here. Hopefully it's starting to make a little bit more sense, and then we will move on, okay? Okay, so I got 2 more equations up here. I got my y equals negative 4 plus 7x, and then I got this guy as well. Okay, but let's start here with number 3. If you look closely at this one, you might notice it's a little bit different, okay? And especially when we go to write my slope and my y-intercept, it's going to be a little bit trickier, okay? So look, when I think about this, right, if you didn't notice, the x value here is actually with my second term, right? My first term doesn't have an x, right? And our 2 terms are separated by this plus sign. But what does that mean? Okay, does that mean the 7 is my b value and this is m? And actually, no, okay, they're flip-flopped. And that happens sometimes, okay? What would be helpful is if I rewrote this as kind of flipping them around. so that it's in y equals mx plus b form. Okay, so 7x minus 4 would be, or positive 7x minus 4 would be the mx plus b way, and that in that right order, that'd be the way to write it. Okay, but yeah, if you're looking at this, so don't be confused by that. You could just change the order, or just thinking about this, the slope is always the number multiplied by the x, and that's another thing to say, right? We say m stands for move. It's also helpful to think m stands for multiply. It's the number multiplied by the x. Okay, so either way though, positive 7 is going to be my slope. But again, that's not a fraction right now. I want it to be a fraction, so I think 7 over 1. And what does that mean? Well, that means I'm moving up 7 and right 1. Okay, so a bunch of counting going to happen there. And then my b value, again, that's the number kind of separate from the x or apart from the x that's being added or subtracted from it, right? And even though it's first in the original equation, right, that's still the number that doesn't have an x with it. So that negative 4 is going to be my b value, okay? And again, that's helpful to see even more when I switch the order around, okay? So graphing that, okay, my b value being negative 4, I go down to negative 4 on the y-axis. Again, not on the x-axis, on the y-axis. And I draw my point there, okay? My b value is good. Now I move up 7, right 1. So I'm going to be counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right 1. So look at that. Okay, let me try it again. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right 1. And we only have 3 points there, right? But obviously we ran out of room because this graph only goes up to positive 10 and negative 10. But again, it's not just that the graph stops at 10 and negative 10. I explained this with the functions unit that we're seeing a small glimpse, just a snapshot of this graph, but it would extend forever. And if you would type in this equation into Desmos, you would see that, yeah, it does go on past this point right here. So just to provide a little glimpse of it, though, here it is. And there's my line, okay? So we would say that, yes, this is a very steep line. And do you remember, steep lines have to do with a slope, right? And we said the further a slope is from 0, the steeper it's going to be, right? Steeper meaning almost completely vertical, okay? So that's what does it, that slope. Now, number 4, y equals 1/5 x minus 8, okay? The order is all good there, but if I think about my slope and my y-intercept, okay, m, my slope, again, the number multiplied by the x, so that's 1/5. And awesome, it's already a fraction, so I don't have to change it. And then negative 8, right, because it's minus 8, negative 8 would be my b value, okay? So on the y-axis, I go down to negative 8, all the way down here. And then I'm moving where? Well, I'm moving, right, rise over run, so top numbers up or down. So that's positive 1, so that means up 1, and then right 5. Okay, so up 1, right 5 is how much I'm counting. So I move up 1 space, and then right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make my point there. Same thing, up 1, right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and just last thing here, do you remember when I said you could reverse this too, right? Instead of going up 1 and right 5, from that starting point, you could go down 1 and left 5, right? That's pretty much the same. That's the same direction, right, that the line would go. It's just kind of, you do that by negating both of these values. Okay, so that's fine, making it go in opposite direction. So that's what that line would look like. And would I say that line is steep? Absolutely not. That is a flat, almost a completely flat line. Okay, so not steep at all. And again, that's because this slope, 1/5, is very close to 0 compared to this slope that is not very close to 0. So there are some lines for you, some more examples. And so we're going to move on to different parts of graphing lines, but hopefully that was helpful, seeing a few more worked out. And so good job. Go Pens.